Thanks for stopping by Drama and True ASMR. We continue today with Chapter 9 of Chuck Palaniuk's Lullaby. Chapter 9. It's the same William and Mary bureau cabinet. According to the note card taped to the front, it's black lacquered pine with Persian scenes in silver gilt, round bun feet, and the pediment done up in a pile of carved curls and shells. It has to be the same kind of cabinet. We turned right here, walking down a tight corridor of armories, then turned right again at a Regency press cupboard, then left at a federal sofa. But here we are again. Helen Hoover Boyle puts her finger against the silver gilt, the tarnished men and women of Persian court life, and says, "I have no idea what you're talking about. She killed Baker and Penny Stewart. She called them on their cell phones sometime the day before they died. She read each of them the culling song. You think I killed those unfortunate people by singing to them," she says. Her suit is yellow today, but her hair's still big and pink. Her shoes are yellow, but her neck's still hung with gold chains and beads. Her cheeks look pink and soft with too much powder. It didn't take much digging to find out the Stewarts were the people who bought a house on Exeter Drive. A lovely historic house with 7 bedrooms and jerry paneling throughout the first floor. A house they planned to tear down and replace, a plan that infuriated Helen Hoover Boyle. "Oh, Mr. Streeter," she says, "if you could just hear yourself. From where we're standing, a tight corridor of furniture stretches a few yards in every direction. I apologize for the noises outside." That's not from the book, that was me. I'm going to start that paragraph over. From where we're standing, a tight corridor of furniture stretches a few yards in every direction. Beyond that, each corridor turns or branches into more corridors. Armories squeezed side by side. Sideboards wedged together. Anything short, armchairs or sofas or tables, only lets you see through the next corridor of hutches, the next wall of grandfather clubs, enameled screens, Georgian secretaries. This is where she suggested we meet, where we could talk in private, one of those warehouse antique stores. In this maze of furniture, we keep meeting the same William and Mary bureau cabinet, then the same Regency press cupboard. We're going in circles. We're lost. And Helen Boyle says, "Have you told anyone else about your killer song?" "Only my editor." "And what did your editor say?" "I think he's dead." And she says, "What a surprise." She says, "You must feel terrible." Above us, crystal chandeliers hang at different heights, all of them cloudy and gray as powdered wigs. Frayed wires twist where their chains hook onto each roof beam. The severed wires, the dusty dead light bulbs. Each chandelier is just another ancient aristocratic head, cut off and hanging upside down. Above everything arches the warehouse roof, a lot of bow dresses supporting corrugated steel. "Just follow me," Helen Boyle says. "Isn't moss supposed to grow only on the north side of an armoire?" She wets 2 fingers in her mouth and holds them up. The Rococo vitrines, the Jacobean bookcases, the Gothic Revival highboys, all carved and varnished. The French provincial wardrobes crowd around us. The Edwardian walnut curio cabinets, the Victorian beer mirrors, the Renaissance Revival chiffrobes, the walnut and mahogany, ebony and oak, the melon bulb legs and cabriole legs and linen fold panels. Past the point where any corridor turns, there's just more. Queen Anne chiffoniers, more bird's eye maple, mother of pearl inlay in gilded bronze or molu. Our footsteps echo against the concrete floor. The steel roof hums with rain, and she says, "Don't you feel somehow buried in history?" With her pink fingernails from out of her yellow, white, and white bag, she takes a ring of keys, She makes a fist around the key so only the longest and sharpest juts out between her fingers. Do you realize that anything you can do in your lifetime will be meaningless 100 years from now? She says. Do you think a century from now that anyone will even remember the Stuarts? She looks from one polished surface to the next, tabletops, dressers, drawers, all with her reflection floating across them. People die, she says. People tear down houses. But furniture, fine, beautiful furniture, it just goes on and on, surviving everything. She says, armoires are the cockroaches of our culture. And without breaking her stride, she drags the steel point of the key across the polished walnut face of a cabinet. The sound is as soft as anything, sharp, slashing something soft. The scar is deep and shows the raw, cheap pine under the veneer. She stops in front of a wardrobe with beveled glass doors. Think of all the generations of women who looked in that mirror, she says. They took it home. They aged in that mirror. They died. All those beautiful young women. But here's the wardrobe, worth more now than ever. A parasite surviving the host, a big fat predator looking for its next meal. In this maze of antiques, she says, are the ghosts of everyone who has ever owned this furniture. Everyone rich and successful enough to prove it. All of their talent and intelligence and beauty outlived by a decorative junk. All the success and accomplishment of this furniture was supposed to represent it's all vanished. She says, in the vast scheme of things, does it really matter how the Stuarts died? I ask, how did she find out about the culling spell? Was it because her son Patrick died? And she just keeps walking, trailing her fingers along the carved edges, the polished surfaces, marring the knobs and smearing the mirrors. It didn't take much digging to find out how her husband died. A year after Patrick, he was found in bed, dead, without a mark, without a suicide note, without a cause. And Helen Boyle says, how was your editor found? Out of her yellow and white purse, she takes a gleaming silver little pair of pliers and screwdrivers so clean and exact they could be used in surgery. She opens the door on a vast carved and polished armoire and says, hold this steady for me, please. I hold the door, and she's busy on the inside for a moment until the door's latch and handle fall free and hit the floor at my feet. A minute later, and she has the door handles in the gilded bronze or molu. She's taken everything metal except the hinges and put them in her purse, stripped. The armoire looks crippled, blind, castrated, mutilated. And I ask, why is she doing this? Because I love this piece, she says, but I'm not going to be another one of its victims. She closes the doors and puts her tools away in her purse. I'll come back for it after they cut the price down to what it cost when it was new, she says. I love it, but I'll only have it on my own terms. We walk a few steps more, and the corridor breaks into a forest of all trees and hat racks, umbrella stands and coat racks. In the distance, beyond that, is another wall of break fronts and armoires. Elizabethan, she says, touching each piece. Tudor, Eastlake, Stickley. When someone takes two old pieces, say a mirror and a dresser, and fastens them together, she explains that experts call the product a married piece. As an antique, it's considered worthless. When someone takes two pieces apart, say a buffet and a hutch, and sells them separately, experts call the pieces divorced. And again, she says, they're worthless. I say how I've been trying to find every copy of the poems book. I say how important it is that no one ever discovers the spell. After what happened to Duncan, I swear I'm going to burn all my notes and forget I ever knew the culling spell. And what if you can't forget it, she says? What if it stays in your head repeating itself like one of those silly advertising songs? What if it's always there like a loaded gun waiting for someone to annoy you? I won't use it. Hypothetically speaking, of course, she says, what if I used to swear the same thing? Me, a woman, you're saying accidentally killed her own child and husband. Someone who's been tortured by the power of this curse. If someone like me eventually began using the song, what makes you think that you won't? I just won't. Of course you won't, she says, and then laughs without making a sound. She turns right past a Peter Meyer credenza, fast, then turns again past an Art Nouveau console, and for a minute she's out of sight. I hurry up to catch her, still lost, saying, if we're going to find our way out of this, I think we need to stay together. Just ahead of us is a William and Mary bureau cabinet, black lacquered pine with Persian scenes in silver gilt, round bun feet, and the pediment done up in a pile of carved curls and shells. And leading me deeper into the thicket of cabinets and closets and break fronts and highboys, the rocking chairs and all trees and bookcases, Helen Hoover Boyle says she needs to tell me a little story. Chapter 10. Back at the newsroom, everybody's quiet. People are whispering around the coffee maker. People are listening with their mouths hanging open. Nobody's crying. Henderson catches me hanging my jacket and says, you call Regent Pacific Airlines about their crab lice? And I say, nobody's saying anything until a suit is filed. And Henderson says, just so you know, you report to me now. He says, Duncan's not just irresponsible, it turns out he's dead. Duncan, dead in bed without a mark, no suicide note, no cause of death. His landlord found him and called the paramedics. And I ask any signs he was sodomized. And Henderson jerks his head back just a trace and says, say what? Did somebody fuck him? God, no, Henderson says. Why would you ask such a thing? And I say, no reason. At least Duncan wasn't somebody's dead body sex doll. And I say, if anybody needs me, I'll be in the clipping library. There's some facts I need to check, just a few years of newspaper stories I need to read, a few spools of microfilm to run through. And Henderson calls after me, don't go far. Just because Duncan's dead, that don't mean you're off the dead baby beat. Sticks and stones may break your bones, but watch out for those damn words. According to the microfilm, in 1983 in Vienna, Austria, a 23-year-old nurse's aide gave an overdose of morphine to an old woman who was begging to die. The 27-year-old woman died, and the aide, Waltraud Wagner, found out she loved having the power of life and death. It's all here in spool after spool of microfilm, just the facts. At first, it was just to help dying patients. She worked in an enormous hospital for the elderly and chronically ill. People lingered there, wanting to die. Besides morphine, the young woman invented what she called her water cure. To relieve suffering, you just pinch the patient's nose shut. You depress the tongue, and you pour water down the throat. Death is slow torture, but old people are always found dead with water collected in their lungs. The young woman called herself an angel. It looked very natural. It was a noble, heroic deed that Wagner was doing. She was the ultimate end to suffering and misery. She was gentle and caring and sensitive, and she only took those who begged to die. She was the angel of death. By 1987, there were 3 more angels. All 4 aides worked the night shift. By now, the hospital was nicknamed the Death Pavilion. Instead of ending suffering, the 4 women began to give their water cure to patients who snored or wet the bed or refused to take medication or buzzed the nurse's station late at night. Any petty annoyance and the patient died the next night. Anytime a patient complained about anything, Waltraud Wagner would say, "This one gets a ticket to God," and glug, glug, glug. The ones who got on my nerves, she told authorities, were dispatched directly to a free bed with the good Lord. In 1989, an old woman called Wagner a common slut and got the water cure. Afterward, the angels were drinking in a tavern, laughing and mimicking the old woman's convulsions and the look on her face. A doctor sitting nearby overheard. By then, the Vienna health authorities estimate that almost 300 people had been cured. Wagner got life imprisonment the other angels got lesser sentences. We could decide whether these old fogies lived or died, Wagner said at her trial. Their ticket to God was long overdue in any case. The story Helen Hoover Boyle told me is true. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So just relax, Helen Boyle told me, and just enjoy the ride. She said even absolute corruption has its perks. She said to think of all the people you'd like out of your life. Think of all the loose ends you could tie up, the revenge. Think how easy it would be. And still echoing in my head was Nash. Nash was there drooling over the idea of any woman, anywhere, cooperative and beautiful for at least a few hours before things start to cool down and fall apart. Tell me, he said, how would that be different than most love relationships? Anyone and everyone could become your next sex zombie. But just because this Austrian nurse and Helen Boyle and John Nash couldn't control themselves, that doesn't mean I'll become a reckless, impulsive killer. Henderson comes to the library doorway and shouts, "Strader, did you turn off your pager? We just got a call about another cold baby. The editor is dead. Long live the editor. Here's the new boss, same as the old boss." And sure, the world might just be a better place without certain people. Yeah, the world could be just perfect, with a little trimming here and there, a little house cleaning, some unnatural selection. But no, I'm never going to use the calling song again. Never again. But even if I did use it, I wouldn't use it for revenge. I wouldn't use it for convenience. I certainly wouldn't use it for sex. No, I'd only ever use it for good. And Henderson yells, "Strader, did you ever call about the first-class crab lice? Did you call about the health club's butt-eating fungus? You need to pester those people at the tree line or you'll never get anything." And fast as a flinch, me flinching the other way down the hall, the calling song spools through my head while I grab my coat and head out the door. But no, I'm never going to use it. That's it. I'm just not. Ever. We're going to end things there, and we'll pick it up with chapter 11 next time. Thank you for joining me.